Hi, my name is Ryan Irving, and this is a message to all my fellow veterans. I wanted to share my experience with the best tool that I've found to deal with overcoming all sorts of negativity. And so here it goes. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, Purple Heart awardee. I was in two combat tours, one in Afghanistan and one to Iraq. When I was in Iraq, I was involved in an explosion was detonated right about 20 feet to my right, and I almost lost my lower right leg. I ended up in a field hospital, and I found out later, actually from reports, that the doctors said at the time I had a 50-50 chance of keeping my leg. I did keep my leg, and I'm very grateful for that. And anyways, so I was shipped over from there to Germany, where I had to undergo a blood transfusion in order to fly back across the ocean to the States because I had lost a lot of blood. So I did that and flew back across the states and ended up where I was originally stationed out of, which is Hawaii. And there I was, in a hospital for about 5 weeks on my back, completely, basically completely helpless. I was hooked up to a machine for painkillers, lots of physical, mental pain. There was depression. There was a lot of guilt there. I had extreme nerve pain, shooting, every, 5 to 10 minutes I'd get a jolt. It wasn't a fun time. I remember laying there and thinking to myself how, guilty I felt about me being here. My friends were still out there, risking their lives and fighting, and all I wanted to do was go back, but I found out that that wasn't going to happen. So anyways, I eventually did get discharged from the hospital, and I was in a wheelchair for quite a while getting pushed around, and it was a very humbling experience. Completely powerless and definitely different than when I was accustomed to being able to do all these things on my own. So ended up in a unit that was new at the time. It's called Wounded Warriors. You may be familiar with it. This is a Marine Corps unit, and this is where Marines basically were sent who had to take extended time to recover from an injury, whether it was combat related or just related to anything they were doing, as part of their job. So I stayed here for quite a while, and still lots of physical pain, lots of mental, emotional pain, and nothing I did really seemed to work. And then one day I found out that there would be a man and a woman coming to teach meditation um, to our company or to our unit. And I was basically told by my commanding officer at the time that I had to go, and so I did. And these people came, they came regularly for, I'd say, a few weeks or so. And I had never meditated before, no experience whatsoever with it. And so one of the experiences I had, and this was a bit of a tipping point for me, was when the female was leading a meditation. And I remember I was sitting in this big comfy chair, and I was just trying to focus on her words. And so she was guiding us to put our attention on different parts of the body one at a time. And it's very similar to Dr. Pillai's yogic sleep meditation, which is basically the same concept. Anyhow, I remember when the meditation was over, I came to, and my mind was completely still, totally peaceful. I got completely lost in the meditation, and for the first time in my life, my mind was like stopped. I felt peace like I've never felt before, and I was like, it was a pretty left a pretty big impression on me. However, I didn't have the discipline at the time to continue doing a meditation practice of my own. So I did eventually get medically discharged, medically retired in 2009, in which I was, sent back home, and I went to go live with my parents. And between, my injury, um, between the transition from going from the military life to the civilian life, and everything that I had gone through, I was, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to be told what to do. I just wanted to be kind of left alone. And I was really just content with, living off of my disability check that would come once a month. Um, I had no motivation. I was still in a pretty bad place mentally, physically, emotionally. And, eventually the pain became so much that it really led to me to question, what am I doing here? What is the purpose of life? These sort of questions started coming up. And this is when I started to research this types of questions on the internet. And I started getting into some very esoteric subjects. And then I remembered one about the one experience I had in Hawaii with the meditation, and that one few moments of peace that I had felt that was completely different than anything I've ever felt before. So I started looking up meditation, and that's when I came across Dr. Pillai on YouTube. And I remember watching one of his videos, and I watched a bunch more afterwards. Everything he said really just made sense, and I was fascinated, I was intrigued, and I wanted to learn more. And so one day I was on his website, and I saw that he's going to be having a trip in California, an in-person retreat to teach meditation techniques. And I really felt the call to go, even despite being, way outside of my comfort zone, outside of my, um, very uncharacteristic of me. I had no experience, in meditation minus that one thing. I wasn't a spiritual person. It was a really different community for me. So anyhow, I did go, and the retreat was amazing. I came home, and I was a totally different person. I started practicing the techniques, and they started to change me. I started to feel more peaceful. I started to feel, happy. I began to have a purpose. I actually ended up getting a job, and I started my own business. I moved out of my parents' house. I got a townhouse. Things were going really, really well for me. And 5 years later, where I'm at now, I've been using these techniques for about 5 years now, and doing Dr. Pillai's programs, and I'm totally transformed. The meditations, the peace and the calmness, the happiness that I feel during the meditations has started to really trickle into my everyday life, where I'm getting these types of feelings on a daily basis. Sure, I still have ups and downs like everyone else. I'm still human, but certainly they're not nearly as extreme by any means. In fact, it's very rare. A down is actually, I'd say it's very rare, and it's not easy to come out of them. So, if you're a veteran and you have been dealing with your own type of pain, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, um, and you've tried different things and nothing's really worked for you, I definitely recommend for you to give this stuff a try. It does work. It doesn't take a lot of practice. It doesn't require a certain belief. It's, as far as I'm concerned, and in my personal experiences, it's total science. So I recommend you give them a try, and you can go to the website pillaycenter.com, and we'll also be sharing different videos and techniques on an email. If you go to pillaycenter.com, you'll be able to get on an email list. We'll be able to share those techniques with you, and I'll be probably the one writing those emails and communicating with you ongoing. So I look forward to serving you, and we really appreciate what you did for our country. And thanks for watching.